Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am your host, Trae Holiday. And joining me during this interview, I have Dr. Ralina Joseph. She's going to be telling us a little bit about this interrupting program that they have. It's called Interrupting Privilege at the UW. And it's really through the Center for Communication and Difference and Equity. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Joseph.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been hearing a little bit about this, exchanging emails, but this is a innovative program. To be honest, tell the folks a little bit more about this interrupting privilege program.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So this is a program that we began at our center in 2016. So when the former president came into office, that fall of 2016, if you remember, our communities were really desperate to talk about race and its intersections, about power and privilege. So we began these intergenerational racial dialogues that were in an interracial space. And so for the first number of years, we brought in different groups of folks to have conversations together. And then after doing that, we pivoted to having all Black conversations. So we wanted to have some intra-racial conversations as well that were hosted initially by the Northwest African American Museum at NAM, and then we had to move online. And so at the centerpiece are our dialogues, where we bring folks in to have all different types of conversations about what does it mean to quarantine while Black? What does it mean to be a Black student in Seattle Public Schools? What does it mean to be a young Black man in a white fraternity? All different types of conversations.
This is really unique. And I think that it hits the mark about kind of the zeitgeist we're in right now. When we think about the times that we're in and how we're having to navigate so many different things, these kind of conversations are integral to understanding where we are as a society and where people are individually. What are some of the things that you see, students walking away from these conversations with greater understanding about themselves?
I think that what students learn is really how to listen better. What we teach is this idea around radical listening. How do you really hold someone else's story and not interpret it through all of your own frames, but really hear it in the ways in which they want for you to hear them and they want for you to understand them. And so that means really being able to pause your own judgment and really focus entirely on them as a speaking partner. And most of us don't do that in our daily lives. So we practice that a lot. And that's what our session that we're inviting people into is going to be about. And that's what the website is going to invite people into as well.
Yeah, because you guys are launching a website. And so I know you want to tell us a little bit about that too. What is it going to mean for a community for them to be able to be engaged in these discussions and maybe, connecting through that website?
Yeah. So our website has the last 4 years of projects. So we began with our first project that was on the first time you ever experienced discrimination. So people came in to tell their stories. We had some elders coming in and talking about segregated water fountains. So some folks that came from the South, and then we had college students talking about being in the dorms. So really a wide variety of stories there. To our second project that was around Generation Mix Goes to School. So mixed race kids, K-12, and their experience, all different types of experiences of racialization and what those look like. To our Being Black in Seattle, and then our Quarantining While Black projects. And so they really provide a way in for people to hear a variety of different types of stories. And these might be researchers, they might be students or teachers or community members, people who want to come in, and you can search through topics. If you're interested in hearing and learning more about microaggressions, you can search for that. If you're interested in learning more about Black masculinity, you can search for that. And really not be told by somebody about what its stories are, but really hear the voices of the people who are experiencing these things and want to share out in their own voice what their experiences are.
I think that's quite phenomenal. And as I think about you guys launching this back in 2016, was the idea always to say, hey, at some point we're going to have to make this available to the public?
So when we launched, we really just wanted to bring different generations together to talk about race. And it was public in that we were inviting community members into a class, into a classroom space. But at that point, we weren't thinking as broadly as a website, and we weren't thinking about hosting these dialogues in this way. It really came about organically, and I think as people really said, I'm not seeing myself represented in media, right? Very much about what y'all are doing, right? And I want for my story to be told.
I just am really amazed at the effort. I mean, I think sometimes when we think about the institutions of colleges, oftentimes in Black liberation movements, we think about the fact that a lot of it is steeped in kind of like an age old way of doing things, and yet they also produce a lot of progress. You have a lot of students who find themselves at the collegiate level, understanding how their voice and their sense of activism has an ability to create some real sustainable change.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of a both and, right? Because as we think about particularly predominantly white institutions, and I know the UW
Yes.
is, right? So oftentimes, like my mother went to UW and I grew up on UW,
Oh, I'm sure she
student
has some
housing.
stories.
Absolutely. And so the ideas of people being able to find their voice, in these predominantly white institutions is a whole nother thing. But I love that you guys are doing intergenerational conversations. Every month, I host critical conversations with Dr. Maxine Mims, who's the founder of Evergreen State College. And one of the things that comes out of that almost every month is the need for intergenerational dialogue. We learn so much from our elders, and yet, there needs to be more of an emphasis on the importance of the stories that they hold and that they carry with them.
Yes.
So as you've been involved, what are some of the things that you've been able to walk away with personally as, a professor at UW, and how has it maybe impacted your work?
Yes, thank you for that. This has completely reshaped my work. So my PhD is in ethnic studies, but I'm trained as a media scholar, so who does media analysis. And doing this work has taken me out of looking at texts and really towards talking to people. I have completely really shifted about where I want for my work to go, and it's also gotten a lot more public because of the need. I've seen the need for people to learn how to speak about race and to speak to each other about race. I mean, in a very tangible way, I think that listening to the stories, I always feel so privileged to be able to be invited in to hear these stories. We also, in the last year, and people that go on to the website can hear the stories of a wide variety of folks from young Black business owners, hairstylists, to Black police officers, and thinking about what does it mean to be a Black police officer in this moment, to folks who are in their 70s and lived in the Central District and then experienced historical gentrification and what was that like to go and open up a bank account at the old, Lincoln Bank, and to see how different the area was decade to decade. So just being so privileged to hear those stories and realize that I have a responsibility to make sure that more people hear them all the time, which is what the website is about.
Well, this is really intriguing, and kudos to everybody who's really been involved in this effort. I think it really takes a different kind of eye to understand how to be innovative, particularly at the collegiate level, and to bring that into community, which I think sometimes there's a huge separation between, this whole college campus, which is huge, by the way, right? UW has such a major footprint in the city, but to bring in community people that can actually speak to their lived experience, I think really plays a key role in how you guys are utilizing this privileged program. And ultimately, this is through, the Center for Communication and Difference and Equity. And we've seen equity now be infused in a lot of different things. For you as a professor, in your time, understanding the importance of equity now and the spotlight that it carries with it. How have you been feeling in terms of seeing all of this progress while you're there at UW?
We still have a long way to go, right? I think that part of what we need to do is to certainly celebrate any gains that we've made. And so I wear another hat. I'm an Associate Dean of Equity and Justice in the graduate school. And we've been able to see some really tremendous gains in terms of numbers of students of color in the graduate school, for example. But that is students who are beginning programs. We have to continue thinking about what types of supports can we provide in order to ensure that those students all graduate.
Yeah.
Right. And that not only do they graduate, but they go on to the careers that they want to have. So this is not the moment for us to let up in any way. I think this is a moment where we need to really continue to push hard and to look at all of our metrics, to think about representation, to think about all of the ways in which we measure equity, and to continue to fight and to hold people responsible. I think that this was a moment the last year where we had lots of institutions and groups coming out and making pledges about the ways in which they wanted to create difference, the ways in which they felt really terrible about the murders of African Americans in particular. And so now is the moment to come due and to say, okay, so now what can we do to actually create that sustainable change?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm always saying is, equity, it just wasn't built into anything inherently. So now it needs to be infused into everything. It needs to be intentional. And the intentional ways that I see it happening, this is really warming my heart to know that the UW is stepping up and is understanding the need for this intentionality, but also, again, the connection to community, because in Black communities in particular, we're very relational. And so it can't be transactional,
Yes.
right? The relationships that you're building with people who are coming to have these discussions is then being able to create that open door to say, hey, you're always welcome here.
Yep.
And that understanding, I think, is so necessary, as particularly for a college to say, we're going to be a leader in this regard. I also love how you said it's not the time to lean up at all. We know that there's so much more work that needs to be done, but you guys are at least making a real strong effort to do that work. Now, you guys have a launch event that you're also doing later on this month. Tell the folks about that event as well.
Yes. So on November 18th, we will be down at the Othello Commons. And part of what we wanted to do was to not just host at the University of Washington, but actually be down in the community. So this is a community site of the University of Washington, but that's down right across the way from the Othello Light Rail Station. And we'll be starting at 5:30. Some of the participants from our past projects will be there, and we'll be learning some listening skills together, listening to them, hearing them talk about their own experiences in the project. And it should be a really great time for students, for community members, and for everyone who wants to learn how to listen better to come together.
Oh, this is beautiful. I'm excited at these efforts, and thank you so much for coming on right here to let us know about these efforts. I'll give you an opportunity right now. Make sure you look right in that camera and tell folks how they can get connected to the website.
Yes.
This one right here. Yeah.
That one right there. Okay. You can follow the CCDE at UWCCDE on Twitter and Instagram, and all of the information will be there. Our wonderful graduate students are keeping up to date with all of the socials. And I just wanted to say, just in closing also, that this project would not have been possible. You talked about relationality, without the relationships that we have with the amazing CEO and director of the Northwest African American Museum, Lanisha DeBard-Laban, who has been just tremendous and essential in creating these connections. And all of the graduate students who work on this project, it's really been their heart for a number of years that this has been really a group project.
It takes a strong team to make a lot of great things happen. And I'll say, particularly when you are being like bold and innovative, you got to have the people that have the foresight. And, saying that this started back in 2016, clearly we've seen so many different changes, and you guys adjusted to COVID by allowing it to be virtual, like so many of us have had to do with in-person events. I'm thankful that, this launch event will be coming up, and it looks like you guys may be also having a live stream. So, make sure you guys are following all the information so that you guys can stay up to date on this amazing effort Dr. Joseph, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Trae. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, you guys know for me, I love to say, you heard it from Dr. Joseph herself. There is a strong effort happening at the UW to make sure that these conversations are taking center stage in a way that they need to. When we talk about what it means to have equity, we need to be having these kinds of conversations. We need to be learning from our elders, learning from folks in community who have the lived experience. The fact that UW, as an educational institution at the collegiate level, has now really launched a strong effort to continue these discussions even after the era of Trump, right? That may have started it, but the fact of the matter is that they understood there was a strong need to continue these efforts. So shout out to everybody over there at UW, over there at NAM, who has helped make this really possible. All the graduate students who are involved. If you guys are looking to be plugged in, maybe share your lived experience as a part of this discussion series. And as Dr. Joseph said, maybe remember how important it is to listen to all of the folks who have the lived experience so we can walk away as better human beings. This is an amazing effort. I encourage you all to get engaged and get involved. Thank you guys so much for listening today.